Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Transparency Committee. I'm Councillor Joe Hargreaves, Chair of the committee, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. The event is being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and to listen to the discussions taking place this evening. But I'd like to welcome all those to Committee Room 1 at Kensington Town Hall and everybody who's watching on YouTube. So before we proceed with the meeting, I would ask members of the committee to make sure their phones are switched off or on silent. Is he checking his own? And I think it would be appropriate for us to start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you. Thank you. We go now to the agenda before us. Item number 1, apologies for absence. I've received one apology from Councillor Claire Simmons, who is conflicted with another council meeting this evening. Any other apologies you like? Thank you. Item number 2, declaration of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare? Thank you very much. And we then move on to item number 3, the meetings of the previous meeting. Sorry, minutes of the previous meeting. Do you want to just? Yeah. There are some errors on this version. What was not the version that should have been sent out. It's got typos on it. Yeah, it had been corrected.
Yes, it has. But it's just a typographical
typographical error.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. But the minutes themselves, the content hasn't changed.
So, can I take these draft minutes as a true record of our meeting on the 22nd of October? Great.
Not the ones in the pack, though, the changed ones.
Yeah, the changed ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any issues you want to raise from those minutes of a technical nature, you know what I mean, rather than a typo nature?
I just, on paragraph 6, that's on page 5, where it talks about the fire doors. That's obviously been an ongoing thing, and I think it says it's gone to the Housing and Community Select Committee. We later on, I think, talking about all the benefit assurance that we've got and overall in governance. Sometimes I wonder if we, if we leave it here, do we know that the Housing Community Select Committee will pick it up? So I suppose that's just part of a wider discussion about how all the different committees, blend together, and also actually on the board of effectiveness.
Okay, so can we just leave to make a note and check that out? If the Claire Chair sat, so she would have been able to tell us this evening, but
The Vice Chair.
Oh, you're the Vice Chair, yeah.
So the answer is yes, it does come up.
Oh, great.
It was also brought up at the Tenants Consultative Committee last month,
Okay.
Which was actually a very in-depth presentation by the chap who's actually in charge of it. In fact, I thought it was so good, I was going to ask if it was recorded to share with
Oh, brilliant.
but I'm not sure.
Okay, but that's very good to know.
But just raise a slightly other point, isn't it? The issues that we say like that. How
Yes.
Any other points on the minutes?
There's nothing in the action tracker except for the minutes.
Maybe there were no actions.
There's one.
On the September meeting, I have two on page
Are there?
202.
Yes.
I missed it, sorry.
Yes,
I
there are.
was getting a bit tired by that. Oh, yes, there are.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought they were. I remember reading them.
Oh, yes,
I think
sorry.
we're in.
It was most of the last page. You're forgiven.
Sorry about that.
Okay, anything else before we can move on? Okay, let's move on then now to item number 4, please, which is the auditor's annual report on the council value for money. Paul, you're with us tonight to do that. Who's going to present it to you?
Yes, I'll start. Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the report as read, but I'm sure if we've got any questions, I will probably take a conversation. So probably the most helpful thing for me is to basically, I think, frame the report in the context of the wider sector. So this report, the auditor's annual report, which communicates value for money work that the auditor does, has become increasingly more important at a number of councils, and we're seeing an increased number of recommendations. So significant recommendations that are basically saying that there are significant weaknesses in arrangements at a number of councils. A lot of that is around financial sustainability, and then some of the other themes that are emerging are weaknesses in things around governance. For example, when councils are potentially embarking on activities maybe to negate some of the financial issues that they're experiencing. So we are seeing increased reporting in those types of recommendations, and also auditors using their statutory powers, so issuing statutory recommendations. So I think the context therefore is that you have a report that doesn't do that. There are 4 improvement recommendations, so they're not rank rated or anything like that, but they're the lowest basically grading of recommendations you can have there. They're improvement recommendations. There are things that if management were to say we don't agree with something, with what you've said on that, we would say, okay, fine, it's an improvement. It's not necessarily indicative of weaknesses in arrangements. So you have 4 of those. You also have a paper that is appended to the end of the report, which is the management responses to our recommendations. So I would consider it a positive report, and it reflects well on the council. And our view is that there are strong arrangements in place in the areas that we are required to cover on our value for money work. And whilst there are obvious challenges, and we reflect on some of those around savings, the council is well placed, or probably at least better placed than others to deal with some of those issues. So I'm happy to answer questions.
David, do you want to add anything?
I think I'd reflect on what Paul said, that's correct. So across the sector, there's been so much movement towards more significant recommendations, statutory recommendations, and Grant Thornton in the summer published a Preventing Failure in Local Government paper, which picked up on some of the lessons learned from other authorities where that's been the case, and that's been sent separate to members to have a look at as well.
Yeah. Okay, let me throw this open for any comments. Councillor Gardner?
Frustrating, there are a few errors. So the number of councillors, you have 28 million and 30 million. I'm happy to give you those.
Yeah.
My question really was about the governance and the reporting line. So I know the council's replied with its response about reporting directly, the section 1 paragraph, reporting directly, sorry, maybe the wrong one, reporting directly to the chief executive, and they've given us sort of different reasons. What do you think of that response, and is it good enough?
What page is this, sorry?
Can you do the big numbers?
So, first of all, the point made is in one of the recommendations. So it's
on page 39 would be the recommendation, and the wording.
and then the response is subsequently in the
Appendix, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, my response would
So
basically be,
it's page 40.
Yeah.
I would point you to the first few words, which is the council should consider. So, I mean, we've raised the point that management has responded on why they believe that the current structure complies with requirements and is reasonable. And from my perspective, that's fine. We've said what we think is as I said, it's an improvement. It's an observation.
So next year, does it come up with a prior recommendation that we can do?
No, I wouldn't. We would probably make reference to it and say we've kind of said our bit. So we would potentially in the narrative we would probably make reference to it as we've reported previously, if at all. But
if you didn't believe that the answer given was sufficient, what would you do?
I think it's because of the nature of the recommendation. So I mean, if we thought there was a significant weakness in arrangements and you disagreed, then either we are wrong or we have that view and we think that you are wrong and there would be more of an issue. I think in this instance, I'm comfortable with the response and I don't think it doesn't merit us escalating it or taking the view that we would be more insistent that there should be a change. But there could be a scenario where there would be, and if that was the case, then we would say that, and we wouldn't bring a report like with the response like this. We would have had that conversation with management previously.
And if you were saying something that we had to change, you'd make that stronger in the report, presumably, would you?
If on our view you were doing something that was either not in line with, so it was illegal or something like that, then yes, we would say that.
Or potentially damaging or dangerous in the governance system. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
So yeah, I just didn't think the response on page 48 covered the recommendation necessarily. Management's response. Just on that point.
So I think if I may, Chair, this particular recommendation, it's a theme that runs through many of the statutory recommendations and public interest reports that Grant Thornton and other external authorities went to either a failure in what's called the golden triangle, so the chief exec, director of finance and secretary and monitoring officer, or where that triangle has been too strong. I think Woking was an example where actually the golden triangle was so dominant that nobody was challenging them. So what we have in place here is a situation where the monitoring officer has regular meetings with the chief executive, although reports to section 151. We also have a statutory officers group, which again is good practice for those three officers to meet regularly, discuss any issues or concerns that are around governance, around lawful practice and so on. So again, we've got those mechanisms there, which mean that the monitoring officer has direct and proper access to the chief executive to be able to have those conversations, and does so in section 151 officer.
Yeah.
So the mechanisms are there to give the statement.
I got a bit lost in the
Yes.
John, are you satisfied with that? Okay. Any other points you'd like to raise on this report?
There are quite a lot of things that are sort of, we say we're going to get the council plan in 2024. We say comprehensive review of the HRA in 2024. We're currently in December. Are these things actually going to happen? And then the recommendation on temporary accommodation. The recommendation should be completed in 24-25, but audit plan says Q4 and reported in 25-26. It's just getting the alignment of the reporting lines.
So on temporary accommodation, the audit work was planned for Q4, 24-25. It will be done in 24-25. It will, in that quarter, it will be reported next week to the committee after that. So I think we're in line with that. What we can do is bring back an update on those actions that are still pending.
Yeah.
The committee.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
It's something I'm going to touch on later, but I in reading this, it heightened my awareness that some of these things we need to perhaps pay a bit more attention to. And I think we need to get people to this committee. So TH at temporary accommodation is definitely what I think we need to spend more time on next year. I think the bit about savings, have we achieved the savings in 24-25? This is more towards the end of the financial year. Have we not? If we have, what impact has that had? If we haven't, why not? And then budget savings for 25-26, I think we need to be much more on top of near the time.
Because nearly half of that falls in 25-26, the budget gap. I was quite worried about that. Yes.
Well, I mean, David, you might. I'm reasonably confident that we will have achieved the savings in 24-25, but 25-26 and 26-27 are just going to get much tougher.
Much tougher.
And so we, I think, as the audit committee, need to get much tougher at monitoring it and being on top of it.
Yeah. And I
Which
did,
I think means we need to get league members here more, and we need to get their heads on here more.
I agree. Yeah, I agree completely. And I didn't understand why temporary accommodation is an increasing issue. What's
So in central London, the numbers across all boroughs are increasing month by month, and so the pressure, the demand for temporary accommodation is increasing.
why?
The scarcity of property,
Okay.
more people coming homeless or in need of housing, and obviously we've got long waiting lists. So again, it makes it difficult for people into our existing properties. People have been placed in properties across London and beyond. It's the scarcity of accommodation, certainly in central London, and the cost of that accommodation is going
up.
up. It's the same.
There are
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
quite a lot of landlords are leaving the market,
Yeah, because
so
of tax.
the stock is going down. But
Yeah.
it's a massive issue, and it has been all the way through the year.
Okay.
And so the current the current projected variance in budget is on top of and is already a variance. So it's massive within the housing community select committee as well.
Okay.
It doesn't make it any easier for us, but it is an issue being felt by councils right across London, not just. But I still think it's something that we need to monitor a bit more.
So, Chair, on the savings and transformation, I think it's a good idea. I think we need to think about the select committees and their role in terms of looking at the departmental savings, and perhaps the committee looking at the risks around the savings programme are being managed. Maybe that's help as a differentiation between the two sets of committees.
And the other one I just noticed was Oracle. I think every sort of answer, every paragraph seems to mention the word Oracle. And therefore I think we need to, I personally don't feel I'm on top of it from an audit transparency perspective. So I think,
Okay.
So, Chair, if you're happy to make sure Oracle and temporary accommodation come back to the March meeting, there will be a paper going to the Scrutiny Committee next week. So once that's published on Oracle, once that's published, we'll circulate that to all committees once you've got this policy of things that are standing out. We're going to have that session in March.
Because the Oracle thing, reading this, but also knowing is crucial to the whole process going forward. Sydney?
Sorry, we're also talking about reducing the high staff to resident ratio. Would you expect that's on page 30? And yeah, I was a bit concerned about that because I thought local authorities were a bit constrained on their resources. The third line down.
So I suppose, I mean, one of the contexts here is that RPKC is one of the smallest boroughs in London. It provides the same numbers of services as all the other boroughs. So there are services which are demand-led, so have more staff or less staff depending on demand. Other statutory services that require a certain number of staff to be able to operate. But there's a challenge certainly from the leadership team to make sure that we've got the number of staff we need to run the organisation at the right level. And that's one of the challenges in the savings programme. So how we achieve that balance in terms of delivering services but having the right numbers of staff in the organisation.
And is there a way we could see what is comparative to other boroughs?
Which that data we can get. Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Because then often you read these things in isolation without knowing it actually is that good or is it? That's good if you look at other boroughs.
Yeah, just had a couple of questions. On page 19, the Centre for Financial Sustainability, we're talking there about the reserves going from 1 through 2. This is line 3 of the executive summary on page 19. General reserves reducing from 132 to 124 over the course of the year. And in the final sentence, it said over time this can erode the financial position, as has happened in other councils in the final sentence. I wanted to ask about our pension being overfunded and whether the pension would be used to provide funding for some of the housing assets that the council needs, and whether that's going to be included in this report, because that's something that we've heard at previous committee meetings, that the council the pension may be able to support some of the other capital programmes that we do within the HRA, because of course technically they're council assets. But there's no commentary as to whether that's likely, unlikely, and may provide financial support. Or if there's commentary on it.
I mean that would be a management decision on what they choose to do. We're making specific reference to the final sentence is a general observation that councils have eroded their usable reserves over time. And it's about keeping it to it's not sustainable to do that. So there are various options available to you. That is one. So
yeah. So what I was asking, if I wasn't being clear, was is that something you've considered as an option? And if you have, I couldn't find any sort of commentary on that particular.
No, we've not considered. I mean, that's something that's been. We're looking specifically at what's happening in 23-24. So that's an option that's been assessed. I mean, that would be something that we would, if it was taken as a decision, we would look at that we would look at what you were doing around that and the risks around that, but it's not something we specifically looked at in now.
The reason I'm asking that question is because obviously you're looking at 23-24, so you're looking at historical data, but you're also making comments about what will happen over time in the future that hasn't yet happened.
Yeah, that's true. There is a degree. Yeah.
So to the extent that it hasn't been done, it's a management decision, therefore you can't look at it. All I'm saying is that you've obviously made other comments about the future, which clearly also haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
And it's certainly been the case, I think, in the previous audit committee when we had the pension hearing that they are overfunded. And of course, clearly there may well be provision for pension to support other council assets, whether that would be something that you'd consider as a value for money exercise within your work.
So you're right, there is a forward-looking element of it. It's not something that we've taken into account. I guess we could have made reference to it being looked into, but I think until we would know more detail, I don't think we could comment on how that what that was going to look like and the associated risks and the merits of doing that. I don't think we know enough at this stage to be able to comment on that. So you're right, it's something that's been looked into, but it's not something that we've in our discussions it's come up. I don't think it changes the kind of overall assessment around financial sustainability.
Okay. And then my second question, which is on page 21, just shows.
Do you want to answer?
I'll say, Chair, so I'm aware, Councillor Youngson, that section 151 officer has been looking at options about the pension fund. So you may recall that in previous discussions around how we paid the civil claims for Grenfell, the council reduced the amount of employer contributions it was making for 2 years to fund the interest on the capitalisation direction, pay for civil claims. So there are options, there are limits to options, there are options being considered, potentially including temporary accommodation, and the pension fund could support the acquisition of public property for temporary accommodation, but these are early stages and need to be worked through and come through the normal process in terms of governance. But it may well be when Paul and the team come back next year, this is something they'll have on their radar. There's been more work on it.
Okay. We're still two.
Yeah, and then the final question was on page 21. I just wanted to understand in the 23-24 risk assessment, you say no significant risks identified. If your reserves go down to zero and you have to finish your section 114, that's a significant risk. In my understanding, so I'm especially talking to residents, but you're saying here there's no significant risk. I just want to understand when you say no significant risk, what you mean by no significant risk, apart from the fact you might go to 114 if you just use your reserves.
Yeah, so that
maybe I just worded that correctly, but it just feels there are significant risks, but you're saying that there's no significant.
Yeah, so that specific bit around no significant risk in the column 23-24, so that was referencing to when we produced our audit plan earlier in the year. One of the things we're required to do is communicate whether we think from our initial work whether there is a significant whether we've identified what we think is a weakness. So then we would go and do the work to determine whether there is a weakness. So we identify the weaknesses and then we would do work around that to satisfy ourselves whether we then think that there is in fact weaknesses in arrangements. So when we did our plan, we did not identify any significant weaknesses and therefore no risks to communicate in our plan. The key thing is that word significant, that comes from an auditing perspective. So we have significant risks from a financial statements audit. So that's language coming from the code that we are applying. So you're right, running out of reserves, that is a significant risk. But in the context of our work, we're required to basically say whether or not we think we've found anything
And you're saying for this
We're
borough,
saying when we did our planning, there was no, we didn't identify any weaknesses. And that's actually been proven by the work then. The outcome of the work is that we've said we didn't think there was anything when we did our planning. We've done the work and we still think there are no weaknesses in arrangements. Therefore, there is not significant risk identified in the beginning.
So just so I'm clear, then you're saying that when you're looking for a risk, you're looking for significant risk in weak operational risks or processes that people are following, not looking at the fact that we could go bust if there's no reserves.
That would be, yeah, so
Yes, I
one,
think that's true.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So the value for money work is we're looking at your arrangements. We're not concluding, we
Yeah.
used to. So our opinion,
So that's
audit,
why I'm asking.
yeah, our audit opinion that we give used to say true and fair view on the accounts and are you giving value for money? Yes or no, it was binary. The code, so the last 3-4 years, this is year 4,
Yeah.
it's now what arrangements have you got in place
Yeah.
to demonstrate that you're delivering value for money. So that's,
Yeah.
so there is a,
Yeah.
yeah.
so for this borough, you're saying there's no significant risk.
And the
We did not
arrangements.
identify
Yeah,
any
you didn't
significant
identify,
risk,
yeah.
and we've done work. Yeah, and we've done work. Yes,
I think it's bizarre that it's that way round, but I mean,
Yeah.
it is how it is. Yeah.
Just to give some context on the reserves themselves that are in the paper there, which are very healthy, they represent 62% of our net revenue expenditure per year. So we're in the top end of the scale.
Yes,
Most authorities are the other side of us on the scale and well below. So it, in terms of the level of reserves currently, those are very healthy compared to our net revenue expenditure.
Good, thank you.
Could I just follow up on a couple of points? Page 24 and page 25. When we were filing the pension fund annual report is published, and secondly on page 25, how is the public interest report with the local elector progressing? Was that closed yet?
it will be very soon. So I think we've received the information we need. So we're just in the process of doing that. But there are steps that we need to take in terms of how we engage with the objector. So it wouldn't be it's not right. Give you more detail, but we would be looking to finish that work and to be able to communicate our view to the council very shortly, hopefully before Christmas.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, should that come back to us when it's
Yes, yeah.
resolved? And the pension fund annual report?
On one side, that's yeah.
So on page 24.
Yes, I
you're
don't
not
know what
being
the answer
provided
is.
with the. All right.
That would go to the pension board or the investment pension board or investment.
That's something we always have the problem of which board it goes to.
Yeah.
It might even the timing between this report when it was concluded, I don't know. There was a lot of the time it can be in December, so I don't know whether or not it's.
It's required to publish its annual report in December,
Yeah.
1st of December.
There's no harm in coming to this for information, right? But actually the work on it is done.
We can get the link when it's published. If it's been published already, it's sent around to the committee.
You then say, so you are yet to provide our consistency opinion. Can the final pension fund annual report impact this? Is the consistency opinion related to this?
It relates to it's saying that the accounts are consistent with the annual report, so we can't issue that until so we can't do it until that's been finalised. So essentially what you have now is, so we've issued our audit opinion, we've done our value for money work. So there's something that you have which is called an audit certificate, which is basically something like everything is done. And it used to be far more significant an issue because under previous legislation, a person could make an objection to the accounts while the accounts were open, regardless of the time period. So it was it was in an interest of council to make sure it was all tied up. So somebody couldn't come, months or whatever years later and then raise an objection and it had to be considered. That is no longer a requirement. So it's less important, but it's still something you need to do. You still need to issue. You need to basically put a notice on your website to say that the audit is completed, but it's not going to impact your financial statements or any other.
When do you anticipate that? What's the gap between when the final pension fund annual report will be published and the consistency opinion?
We just need a couple of days to basically look at the two documents, confirm they're the same, and then issue a consistency statement, which is either a page or 2 pages. So it's not onerous.
Okay.
I think the report went to the investments committee last month. So again, we'll circulate that report.
Thank you.
Then the final question I had was, we had an objection against by leaseholders. What's the position?
Yeah, so the work, yeah, so I think I made reference to that. So we're not planning on doing any more work. So what we haven't done is we haven't communicated our intention to the objector yet on what we intend to do. But we will do that for Christmas. And then there are time scales and people have rights to do things that they need to do kind of thing. So
And that will delay us certifying the accounts until then.
yes.
When do you envisage us certifying the accounts? Not necessarily all the other.
It probably would be after Christmas because we would need to give individuals there's a period of time where they need to
process.
Yeah. Yes, the option, yes, because once you issue a certificate take any, that's it, you couldn't do anything if we wanted. So if we were, for example, to make a decision, hypothetical, if we made a decision and because we didn't have the right information, somebody said, actually, if you looked at X, then if we certified the audit without giving them enough time to respond, then there would be a problem.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring that to a close unless anything else. Just another item I want to page 54, there's reference to it. Another item I think we as a committee ought to get some work on next year is on procurement and the new procurement team.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot on this year. So don't plan any holidays or any time away. Okay, thank you. Paul, thank you also, because I think this is your last meeting, isn't it, with us?
Yes.
How long have you been working with us?
Well, I've covered 4 years, but it's not obviously because I picked up the delayed audit. So I've signed off 4.
Right.
So
thank you for your attendance at our committee and the way you work with us. It's always been very useful and very easy to work with you. So thank you.
thank you very much.
We look forward to welcoming your
Yes.
successor.
Yeah, and we'll make sure there's hand over the team. The team will remain unchanged below. And so there'll be that continuity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ian, thank you as well. Okay. So we're asked to note that. Is it noted? Can we then move on to item number 5, please? Treasury mid-year report. We're going to present this to us.
Yes. Good evening, committee. Mid-year report, it's the Treasury activities, a summary of them to the end of September. I'll take the report as largely read, but I'll just touch on a few key points, which I'm sure will be of interest. So firstly, I mean, I trust you're all well versed with the economic situation at the moment. Bank rate has come down. We've had a recent cut, 4.75. But importantly, inflation is kind of bouncing around that 2% target, which that alongside the most recent budget has led to slight adjustment in the interest rate forecast that Arlene Close are putting forward. So unfortunately, the table in the report there at 3.6, table 1, is ever so slightly out of date now. The impact of the budget is anticipated to be somewhat inflationary, with an increase in supply of goods, which leads to an expectation of rates being higher for longer. So a slowing of rate cuts in the table in the report, there were 50 basis point cuts, and that's sort of been moved to 25 basis point cuts, settling ultimately on 3.75% rather than 3 in the report. So that has implications for the borrowing strategy, of course, although it will flow through to the yield that we continue to generate on our investments. So in this year, we have taken 2 additional tranches of borrowing. These £25 million EIP loan, 4.05%, and a £20 million maturity loan at 4.16%. So these rates are really quite favourable. They were taken in the HRA, and that's how we can access
those rates relative to where they are currently at, which is around about an equivalent of 4.6, 4.7%. That the gilt rates were trending downwards, and then after the budget, it obviously bounced back up, and they're still sort of higher relative to where they've been over the 12 to 18-month period. And there's an expectation that perhaps geopolitical events impact yields as well. And the Bank of England won't necessarily speculate on what will happen with a Trump presidency. However, there are expectations around what that might do for US debt and Treasury yields as a result of that increased risk, but also a reduction in taxes and deregulation. So there you are having an impact on US Treasury yields, which impacts UK gilts as well because of competition in the market for what is considered a relatively safe investment. And why is that important? Well, it's important really because it feeds into expectations around the RLAM investment grade bond fund, which I have sort of regularly said will at the tail end of the rate cycle start to tick upwards. And the distribution yield and the yield to maturity will improve, and that capital loss, unrealized of course, will start to close. We are seeing that there has been an improvement on the NAV for that fund over the past few meetings that have come and presented, and it's at that sort of point now where the benefit of falling rates is really the key factor that will determine the NAV from this point. As you know, most of those short-dated bond purchases that were present in the fund during the reduction in the NAV will have matured and been reinvested. So you have less scope for that capital appreciation and appreciation within the underlying holdings. RLAM came and presented at the last meeting. I think the committee was probably quite satisfied with their presentation and their investment outlook. And it very much continues to be one of selecting very much high investment grade credit and short dated and holding on through to maturity. So currently the yield to maturity on the fund is 6.04%. But importantly, the table at 4.4 demonstrates the trend that I've sort of been talking about in the distribution yield specifically. So we're removing capital appreciation expectations and looking at the distribution that we have been getting. And you will note that is sort of trending up now relative to the money market funds as they come down. So that thesis is starting to play out, and it is again a sort of medium term investment to longer term investment, and it should hopefully provide that protection at the tail end of the interest rate cycle and offer a diversifier within the portfolio, and that table sort of shows that trend playing out. I think that is everything I really wanted to touch on, but of course happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Money market funds, the yield's coming down, but we've seemed to almost trebled or got since.
Can you give us a reference?
Yeah, sorry, in table 4.1. So they're coming down, but we've just trebled what we've got, although it's still advantageous.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we would like to be able to take some duration and lock in some rates over a longer period of time. But it's simply down to our cash flow forecast and our cash position. We can't really lock into anything illiquid even over a 3, 6, 9 month period. And so that is why the focus really has been on money market funds, which is really a focus on liquidity.
Questions? Looking to my left here to get the technical questions.
I've got one more question on paragraph 6.2 on page 62.
Oh, yes, I had that. Yes.
I was wondering why such a low rate of interest that you're charging the HRA for the general fund.
Yes. Ultimately, it's a management decision
You're on
to.
either side of the equation anyway, aren't you? But yeah,
Yeah, with the HRA budgets being under pressure as well, it's a balance between the opportunity cost of that internal borrowing to the general fund without also putting undue pressure on the HRA. And so I think the council has the benefit generally of being the main borrower and locking in fixed rates for a long period of time. And so we bear no risk in the variable rate market. So whereas the HRA would typically be exposed to a full level of internal borrowing in its CFR, which, given the extent of rate rises and the pace of those, their borrowing costs would have effectively tripled within a year. And so it's essentially a decision to help protect the HRA balances whilst easing the rate back upwards. But you'll note that over the past sort of 2 years, a lot of the external borrowing that we have taken has predominantly been in the HRA. So we have been externalising some of that internal borrowing, partly because the HRA is able to access that favourable rate of yields plus 40, but also because of the realisation that there is this fairly low charge on the internal borrowing. And so when we borrow in the HRA, that effectively repays the general fund, and the general fund is able to benefit from the yield on that.
I suppose it's effectively just giving a bit more money to the HRA, isn't it?
Yes.
Capital funds, effectively.
Yes.
So it's a conscious decision.
Okay, thanks. Any more?
Is it worth mentioning that the punitive rate on the Grenfell Public Loan Board has been removed?
Yeah, the capitalisation direction.
Yeah.
Yes, so Labor has removed that 1% penalty rate, which is, yes, of course, beneficial to the council.
Does that backdate, or is that only for new call downs?
That's
Yeah.
just new. We asked the question, but it's just for new loans. But the existing loan is an EIP loan, so we are repaying it as it goes. So that's something.
Are we able to ask how much of it's been called down, or if we still need to call on it?
The whole thing. We're expecting to still need the whole amount between now and the end of March, depending on sort of cash flows.
Just a more general question. We read a lot in the press about a bit of gloom and doom on the economy going forward. What impact is that going to have on our investments? How do you react to that, or do you? I'm not quite sure whether there's a real connection between the economy and the markets, but
With treasury investments, our primary objective is security, followed by liquidity and then yield. So it's a pretty vanilla portfolio. It's pretty low risk, but with the doom and gloom, and assuming that leads into a recession and then faster rate cuts, then the market is perhaps pricing in. What that would actually do is then increase the value of the NAV of the short-dated bond portfolio. It would, because money market funds typically have a 3-month lag, we would see the yield that they are paying drop off pretty quickly within a 6 to 9 month period as that all plays out. And that is actually the benefit of having that short-dated bond fund as a diversifier and a bit of protection in that sort of scenario where rates drop off sharply. We obviously experienced that to our detriment when rates went from almost nothing up very quickly to much higher than we've experienced for a good decade and more. And that was the key driver of the unrealized loss on the fund at that point in time. And as the underlying investments have matured and been reinvested, at a point in time shortly after the mini budget, for example, when yields spiked significantly, maturities were coming through, that was being reinvested at pretty high rates. And so as the bank rate and investment yields come back down, then those investments have a capital gain on them, again unrealized, but that helps to balance out that loss. And so a doom and gloom scenario where there's a recession and there's a need for very fast rate cuts or perhaps support stimulus, the likely scenario there is a capital gain coming through on the NAV fund and the distribution yield still being relatively high for that 2 to 3 year period as those underlying investments mature out.
Good. Okay. Unless there's anything else, then I'm going to ask the members of the committee to approve this report, please. Are we happy to approve it?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick. Can we move on to item number 6 now? Progress on internal audit work.
Chair, so we're around at Hammersmith this evening, so we've got the pleasure of thanks to the audit committee. So you've got the pleasure of my company and they've got the pleasure of Constance. So the audit update is a brief one. So we're looking at the completed audit work. So 7 audits completed and 2 at draft stage. No limited assurance audits to report there. Good progress on the follow-ups as well. And 12 follow-up reviews carried out, and most of the recommendations being fully implemented or in progress to be implemented. In 5.4, just to give an nod to the fact that we do the review of effectiveness piece through the next few months, we'll look to talk to this committee about how we reshape the internal audit update report and other reports as well. So this is currently in the same fashion. Appendix 1 just sets out the work that's in progress or still to be done. And then Appendix 2, we've got a number of recommendations not yet implemented. So there are 3 audits covering 9 medium priority recommendations that are overdue, which are due for further follow-up. And there are, in the second table, there are, again, 9 mid-priority recommendations plus 4 ones that have been implemented. So you can see the work we've done there to help to move those along with the continued follow-up work we do until those recommendations are completed. I'm happy to pause there and take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Andrew?
Well, just you mentioned that your colleagues were at another council. Have you done a comparison of we received the other councils in support? And if so, are there significant differences, or are we all?
So, in terms of the audit plans, we create an audit plan for each council based on their risks and their risk profile.
The same methodology.
And then we apply the resources that need to deliver that plan. I mean, the resources applied across the 3 boroughs are broadly similar. So there are different risks, different needs in each borough that might require different types of audit results. So it might need more IT resource in one priority 1 year than another. But actually, in broad terms, the resource input we give and the management time we give across the 3 is the same.
So nothing to learn.
No, I'd say there's quite a bit to learn. We do learn. So we learn in terms of audits that we get asked to do at one authority that weren't on our radar to start with, and think actually we could be doing that one or the other 2 boroughs as well. And I think we learn from the practice of doing the audit. So we're building the in-house capacity, reducing our reliance on external provisions. So again, that's good training for those newer members of the team to be able to carry out an audit more than once at more than one borough where that's appropriate. And I think, again, we look at where there are common risks and the potential to learn and share that learning with officers in the areas we're auditing as well. So we do quite a bit of that as well informally, to share where we've seen good practice at one of the boroughs, help one of the other boroughs to be able to pick up on that as well.
Liz?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you very much for this. I think I've voiced this before. I had trouble following 5.1 through to the appendices. First of all, the titles. but then even the number of recommendations. So 5.1 has 6 recs in progress, but Appendix 2 has 9 medium priorities. And then page 78 of Appendix 2, there's 5 medium priorities implemented for climate emergency, but table 5.1 has 6 recommendations to implement. I just had trouble with that.
So what was the first one? So I didn't catch the name of the first audit, sorry.
Well, it was just the whole thing in, it was, yeah, Appendix 2 has 9 recommendations, but 5.1 has 6 in total in progress.
So which, sorry, I would like to, okay, so.
I can send you my notes if that
Please, I
helps.
mean,
That
we've done a lot of
might
work to try and make sure they do reconcile anything.
And I couldn't tie in the names either. You know, I just got completely lost. So I know you're looking at these reports, but I just think that's something to look at.
Yeah.
And also in Appendix 2, I was a little bit concerned that some of those delays were quite long.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So again, we picked that up with management and we look at where there are extenuating circumstances. We would revise dates and we go back to follow up on those. So again, we'll report back to those. If they don't do it, so that's really a good point at which you want to have officers come to the committee to explain why.
Yeah.
Page, so
I had a more prosaic question, so if some people would like to comment on the report.
okay, we'll come back to your presenting question.
I
Tara.
hope mine isn't present as well, but it might be. Thank you very much for the report. I do think it's very helpfully set out. I mean, actually coming from sort of central government, the kind of process is slightly different. And so, I mean, that doesn't mean to say central government's better, and I'm sure that there are reasons for each of them. But it strikes me that there are a lot of quite small audits. And you know, often I'm not sure whether they all get done or not. You know, some of them get deferred, like that temporary accommodation. I'm not sure quite how we control A, which ones are chosen, or how we influence it, and B, how we follow up that they are going to be done. Although you have set it out here, so you're not conceding anything at all. I appreciate that, but in a way, I almost the kind of environment I come from, you look at your risk register and say, yes, which areas are we going to do quite a deep dive, quite a big piece of work, yes, on, say, for example, procurement, which the chair mentioned, or cyber, or whatever. You can't obviously audit every aspect in one go, but that's how I would normally sort of think it would happen. And also, I mean, I might have missed something, but it says here, you know, again, very transparently, that it's decided the 3 + 9 month following discussions with the directors. That is kind of what I would expect. You would start with the executive and you'd kind of ask directors how they would, you know, what they think should be audited. But then you bring it to a committee like this one and say, do we kind of agree with the choices made? I mean, we might have had that. I might have just.
So in terms of the process, we do start with risk registers, and we start with our what we know about the risks in the organisation. We do then talk to directors on a quarterly basis, and the executive management team, and we do bring the plan here in March, which we will do again to get your comments and observations. I think it's interesting across local governments, quite a range of practice where some authorities have actually more smaller audits than we have, and there are some who have very few large audits, and there are risks with all three, but in a sense, I mean, there's a risk with a small number of large audits, you miss some quite fundamental areas. There's a risk of having too many audits where you actually don't get into depth into the topics. I think we are mindful of that, and perhaps again, there's a new standards as they come forward. We perhaps need to be a bit better at showing the kind of resource we apply to some of these audits, so you get the sense of actually this is a larger piece of work, which is because it's a larger risk. Therefore, you can see the investment in the audit, as opposed to some of the things which our management have asked us to look at, because it is a risk for them. It's not a corporate risk. So we're trying to help them to improve that particular area as well. So try to give you a bit more of a sense of that balance between the pieces of work in the plan.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because I mean, I can see that some areas you need to have small detailed ones, say on schools.
Yeah.
Don't have that.
One of the bits we are looking at, and partly in response to the Grenfell inquiry report and our council response, is looking at how we use a form of continuous audit to do some spot checking on some high priority risk areas, but to do it quickly and then report on it quickly to management, so if they're and to the committee. So if there are issues, they get flagged early. And that frees up more time then to do some more deep dives as well into those areas where there are more concerns. We're looking at how we evolve practice as well. I mean, we have conversations with government's internal audit service now on some of our networks, and it's interesting to see how they operate. So we do share practice across
But
the
also,
sectors as well.
if we could see how this does tie into the risk register, because that was something, that I think is missing. We can't get a handle on what's covered and why it's being covered. So we do need to have that mapping.
So when we do the plan, we do it. So apologies if we drop down to try and keep the report simple this time. You're right. So we need to think of a way of just regularly demonstrating to you actually what we've got against the risk register and the council plan priorities, which is built from the external audit raised, and the resource we apply
to do that.
Those pieces of work, so you can see that we're applying resource to risk.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, and I think maybe when we come onto the board of effectiveness review, we might touch on sort of having an assurance framework where you can do line 1, line 2, line 3, and show us how we get assurance on all of them, and tie it in with what the kind of overview of all the different boards are.
Yeah, indeed. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Just a general comment, then we'll come to yours. There's a number, aren't there? Not a huge number, but where the inspection has been deferred for a variety of reasons, staff changes. I'm just looking, for example, on page 72, the Environment and Neighbourhoods Highway Maintenance contract deferred due to higher priority audits. I appreciate some things get in the way, but sometimes are we robust enough? No, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
You may be short of staff, but we're going to do it.
So where we think it's a high risk, we absolutely do that. So we had an example recently where we had to push back. We'd agreed one deferment already, and we asked for a second. We said no, we're doing it. So we do that.
I can't believe there's any more high priority audits than our audit.
No, but it's just within our audit. So I think, the highways maintenance contract is one that there's regular review anyway through sort of the corporate procedures. So it's something that's not as high risk as other areas. But I'll take that back. And we need to be clearer how and where we push back and what we should push back on.
So I think that leads very nicely into the question I raised at the Omni and Scrutiny Committee the other week, which was internal audit is scheduled for a budget cut. And I went, but I have thought,
is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll explain that. It's a savings. It's a savings.
But for me, one of the issues that we had raised in both within this committee, and it comes up later, about effectiveness of audit and the importance of audit being independent set of eyes, essentially, particularly if you use external auditors. And so for me, I agree with that at the time as to whether that was going in the wrong direction, and I very much.
I'm happy to respond to that. So as with all departments, we've had to put savings forward for 25-26, and we followed on with a trend of what we did 2 years ago, where we effectively were reducing our reliance on external provision, which is more costly than having in-house staff to do the audit work. So we're actually increasing the capacity of the in-house team. We're reducing our reliance on the external provider. We'll have the same number of the same amount of audit resources to deliver the audit plan, but we'll have saved £50,000 on the audit budget. So we're quite innovative in terms of how we've got about getting a better presence in-house, which actually something I think is really important to have that engagement with the organisation, but doing it in a way that protects the amount of resource we need to do the work and actually enhances the structure of the team to be able to have succession planning, to be able to have people developing within the team, which we don't get with external providers. So we've got a good sort of track record of bringing apprentices and actually promoting them and then bringing them up through the structure, which in internal audit in London is quite rare. It's one of those professions that struggles to recruit and retain staff. Actually growing our own has been quite popular, a sort of successful way of making sure we've got the right resource, but we can reduce our reliance on external provision and reduce our cost, but without affecting the service.
Does it not come back to one of the fundamental challenges, which is you're now marking your own homework? Because that's the role of Mazars, is to come in and act
no,
as.
they're not there to challenge us, they're there to carry out work we ask them to do.
But
So they're
essentially council staff.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's my point. Mazars are giving you an element of independence because they have their own reputation and they have their own standards that they wouldn't.
And the same standards we have to apply to as internal auditors, the same professional standards.
They would have to do that as an internal.
So they're not there to challenge or check us in terms of our independence. We have the same independence as the external providers.
They work in the same code of governance and the
Same,
same.
exactly the same codes and exactly the same standards, which we'll come on to in a bit. So, we have, so what we're now not having to do is to mark their homework, actually. So we're not having to review their work, which can be quite intensive because their staff don't know our organisation, whereas our team do. So actually doing the audit work on the in-house team is actually more effective if you know the organisation better. So we've got that better. So the independence is absolutely the same. And my role, so marking your own homework, I understand as head of internal audit, I've got a professional duty to make sure that I've got the right resource, the right team, the right structure, and the independence of the team to deliver the audit plan. That's my role.
Liz, you were sort of nodding there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me.
The perception by residents will still be you're marking your own homework.
But with all due respect to it, they probably don't understand internal audit. Internal audit is a separate body within the.
And same in the government, isn't it? See, the government internal audit service.
For sure.
People employed by the government to provide internal audit to government departments. They comply with the same professional standards.
I mean, I suppose as long as you feel and we all feel that you are able to be sufficiently independent and your reporting line, we talked about the reporting lines before,
Yes.
that you're not kind of controlled by anyone in the executive.
And that's where the peer review that we had last year, again, as part of that picture of assurance that actually we've got the right arrangements in place to manage independence and objectivity. Again, reporting lines, I meet regularly with the chief executive, meet regularly with Gerard, so I've got those lines of communication to be able to raise concerns where there are concerns, and I do think where there are concerns, I raise this, all through councils.
Joanna, I think the more material point to me about independence is when David took on a line responsibility
That was an
for
issue.
procurement.
Yes.
That's referred to in the value for money report, and I think that's worth reflecting on whether that ever should have happened or whether it should happen again, irrespective of the individual, because
Which is a fair point.
I think that's more of an issue about independence.
So again, now we've got head of strategic procurement in place. We've got the arrangements for so when any audit of procurement happens, I won't be involved in that process. So I won't be involved in scoping the work, in delivering the work, reviewing the work. That'll be something that Lisa will do as another SIPFA qualified accountant, who's the Director of Financial Management. So again, I appreciate within the organisation we've got that separate assurance that there's independence in terms of that work that's carried out. I appreciate Andrew's point that it's not ideal, and many of my colleagues across London have many and varied things that they.
I think it's something we continue to raise a concern at, and what you're saying, which is correct. We're putting policies or procedures in place to mitigate that situation, but the situation is still.
And they will raise it right. It's right there.
Okay. Any other questions on that paper? So we are asked to note that report. Is it noted?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we move then to item number 7, the Global Internal Audit Standards Update?
Thank you, Chair. So
you need to do this. You need to keep us awake while you're doing this.
In 2017, Global Internal Audit Standards came along with 10 core principles. In 2023, the Institute of Internal Auditors, which is the global body that oversees the standards for internal audit, consulted on a new set of global internal audit standards that apply to all sectors, all countries. Any audit professional in any country, in any sector, is meant to comply with this. So they were consulted on in 23, they were published in 24, but all but the public sector in the UK, they go live in January. But in the UK, we have special arrangements whereby the Internal Audit Standards Advisory Board produce an application note for the public sector, which includes central government. And then SIPFA, bless them, produced another code, another guidance, specifically for applying the standards in local government. So we were expecting the IASAB final document later this week. We're expecting the SIP one in January. That will then show that the sort of variations which we're allowed in local government to apply to the compliance with the international standards because some of them apply to private companies. So things like the remuneration of the head of audit is decided by the board in the private sector. In the local government, then pays service if it determines pay and rations. Things like that that are subtly different. I'll just draw your attention to 4.5 in that it sets out what they've there as 5 domains with the 15 core principles. The key one for the audit list is domain 3, which is governing the internal audit functions. And to give you a bit of background information, I've appended some information, particularly around domain 3, as a bit of background reading for you. What I'm intending to do is to leave this with you to give the chance for conversation over the coming months. We'll be doing a transition plan, a gap analysis of where we think we are in terms of the new standards, which we'll bring back to you, an action plan for anything we need to put in place, and then be able to demonstrate to you how over the year we're meeting those standards. Without going into lots of detail each meeting, it's just giving you the ability to see how we're, because you have a role as the board, so it's the council being delegated down to you to be the board for internal audits.
So I guess until we get that paper for how this applies to local government,
yes, it will be similar, but
work in progress, isn't it?
It'll be similar, but it won't be exactly so. So it's helpful now just to give us a flavour of what the new standards are looking at and what the other standard setting boards will be doing over the next month or two.
Just on page 93, the cybersecurity out consultation until the 3rd of July. Is that happened or is that 3rd of July next year?
Right, so this is where they have what they call topical requirements. That one, so this slide deck is produced from real July, it's not come out yet.
So July 2024 was it supposed to?
So the IIA, as part of the standards, as well as setting the standards for how all audit work was done, are going to produce topical standards on particular areas of work. But we've not seen those yet. So again, when we get those, I'll share those with you.
And I didn't see anything unless it's covered in cybersecurity on AI governance and that, because that's going to become quite an issue going forward.
Yes, it will. So again, that's something that we will be looking at. It's something that IIA haven't yet got requirement.
Any idea why? I would have thought that would be.
It might be the too difficult box for now.
Okay.
That's one question. Page 82, 4.8, the third bullet point, going through planning. Am I right? You've got to get the agreement of the chief executive and the engagement client before you start work?
No, so the phraseology is not helpful. So
right.
I'm the chief audit executive in the global standards speak.
Okay, so that's you. But then,
That's me,
so
yes.
going back to Tara's point earlier, that if a partner pushes back and says no,
Then I say, no, you are doing it.
but it says you've got to get their consent.
Yeah, so well, then I've got to agree the terms of reference that it's going to happen. So there's a discussion between the auditor, the audit manager, and the client. Terms of reference are drafted. I will say yes or no. If there's any problems around pushback, then I'll get involved as well. We'll get involved to deal with that.
This seems to say that they have to agree. Otherwise you can't start work.
Yeah, so we negotiate with them to make sure we get scope right. So it covers areas that will be helpful to them, but also covers the risks we want to cover.
And if they don't agree?
Then we would escalate it.
Right.
And ultimately we bring it here. So if we had an item on the plan, the director said, I don't want this audit, I don't want this scope, ultimately we bring it to yourself.
And what power do we have?
Well, I suppose, given this, you would say to them, we want the audit
Go ahead, yes. Yeah.
A question, Chairman. This look very heavy on process, isn't it? And
which the standards are. Yes.
I just wonder, something to
Yeah.
do we have to see papers on all process to be able to carry out our job properly? So if we didn't have this
Yes.
wodge of paper,
Yeah.
which I suspect many of us have just scanned, what deficiency?
So you may find as a committee you're not complying with the standards. So
If I make a comparison,
Yeah.
I don't think you bring every international government down to this committee.
No, but this is one that specifically relates to the audit committee as well. So domain 3 is about
So,
the audit.
right, then you could. I just wonder sometimes if there's some good ideas which get smothered with process. So you've got a good idea, Chairman, about where is AI in this? Spot a gap. That's really important point. Gnawing away really the process which has been developed by many people, and it's a given. I just wonder, whether this is perhaps more of a training thing, and
Well,
if it is training, it shouldn't be a committee matter.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to review effectiveness, I think this is the conversation we want to have. What gives you enough information as a committee to feel like you're informed, and then you're able to assess the reports we bring, and what of that does need to come to the committee, and what of it can be.
I just wonder.
So it's a really good point, Andrew.
And I think I'm always more interested in what does that mean for us?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like you say, Andrew, with all due respect to the IIA, I skinned this, and I hope they'll never find out. But always for me, so what? What's it mean? And what's it mean for the council? And what's it mean for this committee?
Yes.
And when we know more about that from the interpretation for local governments, then that will be the bit that I'm really.
Okay.
Okay. So can we note that report, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. We now move on to item number 8, compliance with City Financial Management Code. Be quiet. I'm afraid there was a lot of reports in here tonight.
Technical in nature, sorry.
I know obviously the last couple of weeks are very focused on the audit, so now we're catching up on some of the things that we need to. Who's going down, Anna or David?
Yeah. Hello. So you'll have seen the report. It's the 4th statement setting out how the council complies with DIPA's financial management code. The code has 6 principles, and they are set out in section 2.3 of the report: organisational leadership, accountability, transparency, adherence to professional standards, sources of assurance, and sustainability. And the code, it takes these 6 principles and translates them into 7 standards, of which there are 17 subsections. In this report, we refer to the 22-23 compliance statement and the actions arising from that statement, and they are set out in Appendix 1. Appendix 2 is the full compliance statement for 23-24, and also in relation to 23-24 in paragraph 3 of this report is a summary of the further work against 6 actions that we plan to undertake in order to increase our robustness and demonstrate that we are further compliant with the standards in the code.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that. And I was just looking at reading paragraph 7 on page 112, which I think already backs this up as well, doesn't it? That actually the opinion is that we do have a robust financial management processes in place. That tends, as I say, to get backed up with the audit. Nevertheless, there are things that we need to continue to work on, and you've listed some of those there. So without getting too much into the weeds of this, unless the weeds give you concern, any points, Joanna?
Page 116. I'd like to understand what a minimum revenue position is, and then separately, I would love you to come back with more detail about what is a cost improvement programme. So that's M and then N.
So the minimum revenue provision is the amount of money the council sets aside in revenue to service its capital borrowing.
And that we put in the budget every year, don't
We do, yes, and that's now set out very clearly in the Treasury Management Budget position, and that's reported on in the reporting monitor.
And your second question?
And the second question was about the cost improvement programme.
So I'll pick this one up. So this is work we're doing. So as we're drawing together the contract register and the procurement pipelines we're required to do the new procurement act, we're looking at opportunities through our spend data to see where we can reduce the number of contracts the council has, but different departments have got their own contracts for the same sorts of things. To aggregate those, to procure those together, but efficiencies both in the way in which we procure and economies of scale we get, but also the resources to manage the contracts. So we're looking at using the pipeline and the contract register as levers to improve how we do procurement and to reduce our costs.
Thank you. And one further thing, page 118, which is against savings and transformational achievement. I think it'd be really helpful to actually show where other savings are made in lieu of or offered in lieu of anticipated savings that don't materialise. I just thought it would be really helpful to have that.
Thank you. In this report or something?
Would that be in the MTFS reporting goes to Cabinet?
So we report on savings that haven't been achieved. I don't think we go into detail as to how undeliverable savings have been met from savings elsewhere. At which point I can take that.
Potentially doesn't really help the department, does it? If they've had a deficit or if they had an anticipated saving of pounds X and they've gone, we haven't achieved that, but actually we've offered you an alternative, they still come across as a negative because they didn't achieve their initial saving, but they have actually offered you.
I think as long as they deliver the saving for their department, then that's fine.
That's fine, yes, but we do report on where the essence of the saving hasn't been delivered, even though financially the petition is balanced. Yeah.
I guess there is a question there, isn't it? If they should have achieved the saving here, they didn't, but they achieved the saving there, should they not have achieved both those savings?
Usually the other saving would be perhaps a one-off underspend that would go toward helping to meet the, so it's just temporary fix really, it's not a long.
Okay, but they could have done that anyway. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And we would look to right size that through the budget plan for the next financial year.
Good.
I had one small question on page 111 about the register of interest. I sort of thought I didn't really know much about the register of interest. So I quickly looked up and so I looked on the website just to check it was on the website, and indeed it is on the website, which is good. I looked at some councils and the register of interests are varying dates. I mean, some of them are much older than others. I wasn't quite sure how that worked. I also didn't see one for myself. I didn't know whether I couldn't remember whether I'd filled one in or not, but I wondered whether I should have done so and whether it should be there if I should have done so. So it was just a sort of spot check, and I just wondered how that all works.
So we can pick up good governance. I think there are different rules for co-optees and for elected members, but we'll check that for you. But again, there's an annual, as I recall, an annual.
We get a chase every year to make sure it's up to date.
And the auditor, the external auditor is always looking for that as well.
But some of them seem to be back in sort of 2018 or something, so they didn't look as though they'd be. Maybe it was just that there was no change or something.
Yeah, if there's no change, you still should be.
Yeah,
should the date should be updated anyway. Should probably.
And I suspect 2018 is quite a It's good. Well spotted, Tara. Thank you. The other one that we're getting much stricter on is a register of gifts and hospitality.
Oh yeah, that's
and that's we're always getting reminded.
I just got one in my other life. Sort of told my manager, and very kindly gave me a bottle of English champagne, and I'm not sure I need to register it. But that's what my other one.
You won't be getting any of those from us.
No, that's good.
Any other questions on that?
No, I just had a bit of difficulty tying them all together into the table at 3.2. Certain things were included, certain things weren't, and then certain opportunities to enhance good practice that went in Appendix 1. But I can provide you with those details of those.
Yeah, I mean, I can explain that now if it's helpful.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's quite complex. So 6 principles translated into the 7 standards. So what I have done in the initial section of the report, so section 3, paragraph 3.2, is just set out those where we are looking to make further enhancements to our processes to improve our compliance. And then the full statement is contained in Appendix 2 of the report, and that goes through all of the subsections in detail. So you should find all of the opportunities to enhance good practice that are tabled in 3.2 in the main section of in the main appendix, but in
Appendix 2.
detail. Appendix 2, which is the full statement setting out full report.
Quite a long.
It's quite a long report. Then I also thought there were areas in Appendix 2, areas for improvement that I thought should be taken forward to Appendix 1, but I couldn't find any.
Appendix 1 is the outcome. It's responding to actions from 22-23.
23-24.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
These things do take a lot of following through, don't they? And, I guess when it's your language and it's your everyday job, it's easier to link it all, but much so. Okay, then can we note that report, please? Thank you. So we're now on to item number 9, the strategic risk reviews.
Thank you, Chair. So, subject to the work we'll do through the review of effectiveness, the risk register is presented in the same format as it was presented in March. So you've got the summary report, which identifies I'll come back to the risk dashboard, and the heat map, and the detailed register which sits behind that. So the risks were faced over the last couple of months. So effectively, the main changes are an increase in score for risk-free, which is the investment and improvements in the council's housing stock. So you'll be aware, obviously, that the housing revenue accounts, both here and other councils, are under quite a lot of pressure. Obviously, there are inflation increases that are arising from Brexit and from the recent economic shock. There are new burdens to the Building Safety Act, Social Housing Regulation Act, and so on. And obviously, the national insurance increases announced in the budget are going to have a further knock-on effect. So we're doing some work actually internally with colleagues in legal and finance currently to look at and assess the contracts where this is going to be an issue, where there isn't indexation of the contracts, and where it's predominantly staff who are providing services through a contractor. So that's something we are working on a corporate project on that now. So the risk there is obviously to make sure we get the housing stock in the state which is fit for all our residents. Risk 3, risk 10, cybersecurity has been increased to maximum score. So looking at across the public sector, the number of the increase in the number of hacks and incidents in local authorities and public sector generally, and the kind of impacts that's having on those organisations. I think it's right that we've got a lot of good mitigation in place. Where since we last reported, the council has implemented what's called a SOC, so it's a security operations centre. So it doesn't have staff obviously 24/7 in the building monitoring potential cyber intrusion. We've engaged a third party who does that about half out of office hours, so that's quite a more common practice now in the sector. So that SOC is giving 24/7 protection against potential attacks and from hacking and so on as well. So it's right that one's increased. Risk 15, the support for refugees and asylum-seeking families. We're going to take that from the strategic register, partly because the numbers that are now placed in the borough have reduced a lot, but we've got systems in place now. Should we have another situation where from another country we've got lots of people coming in that are being placed by the Home Office in the borough, we've got really good systems and processes in place to make sure it's managed going forward. 4.7 identified a new risk we've added to the register since last time, which is around compliance and operational properties. So this is where the council owns buildings like the town hall, ones that it operates services from, and its commercial estate that rents out properties to third parties. So here there are concerns around making sure that all the documentation and the testing around sort of gas, electric, fire, water, and so on, asbestos, is up to date in all those buildings. And there's a thorough review being done of that now. We're also doing some internal audit work there as it happens around these sort of systems for reporting as well. So there's a plan which has been put in place, and you'll see some of that in the detail in the appendix. Again, this is where the chief executive is meeting regularly with colleagues in housing and social investments. There's also the commercial assurance on building safety group, which is reviewing this. There's lots of governance around to make sure that this risk is actually being managed down in short fashion. The other thing to add on table 1 is that the external auditor in their VFM report last year said we should try to link the corporate risks, the strategic risks, to the council plan. So this is the first pass at that. So you've probably got, there are 4 priorities in the council plan: fairer, safer, greener, and making it happen, which is the sort of corporate cost cutting theme. There are something like 80 sub themes, which is where the numbers come in. So I'm going to be doing some work with our corporate policy colleagues between now and the March meeting to look at how we can make that analysis and that mapping more meaningful, and also to understand how the council plan action plan priorities, the 80, have actually all got good understanding of risk against each one. What are the risks of delivering on those priorities? That's something again will feed into this process. We will be reviewing the risk register in light of the Grenfell public inquiry report again. So again, when we come back next time, I think there'll be some changes in the risk register, which we'll see. But also through the workshop we'll do on effectiveness, want to pick up on how we can present strategic risks for you. That's something we talked about before.
Yeah.
So I've got some thoughts there that we can share as part of that, because of how we might do that. But so for now, we can see there are a couple of risks going up, one down and off, one new, others staying broadly similar. There are lots of updates to the, and I'll do some analysis and send it on to you, but lots of actions have either been updated, completed, or have changed or been added on in terms of detail. I'll make sure I'll send you some analysis that gives you a bit more of a breakdown of that to get the sense that actually things are happening on each of the details. I'll stop there.
When you read table 1, you kind of go, oh yeah, that's all going well. Then when you get to the table 2 with the heat map, you suddenly go, whoa. So for me, I really would prefer you to put some portrait and you actually had, red very high next to, for example, risk 13.
Yeah.
Because I would like to see it all in one place, and at the very least, the heat map needs to be.
So perhaps the moving arrow, if I colour that by the rag status, that would help to be in one place. So
well, I mean,
the red.
You do on 3, you do it as red, but I didn't pick up that was very high. Whereas actually, it's the top right hand.
So I didn't get the correlation between March 24 and October 24.
Correct.
That in March 24 there was nothing in the top right.
Yes.
And am I reading this now? So things have got worse.
So risk 10, which is cybersecurity, has moved from likelihood or impact 5 to 5.5.
Yeah.
So it's moved from the to the top corner.
It's very hot. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Then also on 12, a major failure of the key contract was supply. When you actually look at the risk, you also talk about the Procurement Act.
Yes.
And that's not in that heading.
No, so I'm trying to keep it simple. Then I can amend those.
Well, I don't want this to get many more complicated. There's a lot of work on making it quite
So
simple.
trying to show it on the page, 2 pages to get to them. But
So I was intrigued in terms of on the basis that we've got the national insurance changes coming in.
Yes.
And so for me, I would have thought that actually should potentially have moved up.
And that will come in next time. That we missed obviously in terms of the
So
budget.
when is the next time around?
So we're doing this every 6 months, remember now? So we'll be coming back to in 6 months' time. The risk register again.
It will be after April.
Yes.
It's become so.
But what we can do is highlight where, in fact, it creates a new risk. We can tell you about.
Well, I mean, we don't know, do we? But the whole of the new employment bill.
Yes.
Yes,
Until the
that's
detail.
Until we get the details on that.
Until the details.
Because I think that the government is covering some of the NI increases, aren't they? But are they covering it for SUIs or?
So we think they may cover part of councils directly employed staff, not agency workers.
Yeah.
And they probably won't cover contractors.
Yeah.
That's the expectation. We don't know the
Which are
detail.
like, okay, so that might be better. Liz, were you your point?
No, I don't think I did actually. Yeah, I actually was quite concerned about the new risk 20. I wonder if that's something we should do a deep dive into.
Yeah.
And other than that, I was sort of, I had various questions, but overall I was quite happy. Yeah.
So we're looking at that on the list.
Yeah, but then also we do need to map it to the internal audit work. There needs to be some time.
So that will be done. So we can next on the report on that.
All insurance work, really, not just.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Andrew?
I looked at page 19, the strategic risk is sequence set.
Air Quality Commission.
Air Quality. Well, yeah, I know it's Air Quality Commission, but I kind of think that isn't a strategic risk.
No.
The risks are behind that. That's just identifying, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
an identification process
Yeah.
rather than the strategic risk. So That's my look at it. So why is it in there as a strategic risk?
So there's work we're doing to develop that into a more corporate risk, which is around inspection generally. So CQC was the first because CQC hadn't inspected local authorities for over 10 years until the inspection has just been happening.
Okay.
So that's why it's flagged by the strategic the exec director for adults.
But
What we want to do is build that into
It's the wrong way of thinking, though.
Well, it's supposed it's like the risk to there's two aspects to it. There's the risk of having services that are not fit for purpose for residents,
Yeah.
which we need to articulate better.
Yeah.
And there's actually the risk of having the capacity to deal with multiple inspections. So we know we've got CQC who are in, we've got Opposite who've just been in, we've got the social housing regulator who is going to be coming anytime soon, given Grenfell. And that's just three sort of large inspection bodies that we are potentially be dealing with at the same time. So as an organisation, now we have the.
But that's a different
capacity
way
to
of
deal with
looking at
that.
it.
I don't think a lot of these are strategic.
Yes, so, yes.
Yeah, that's the.
Can we
that's
answer
the bottom one, yes.
from just that
Yeah.
standpoint?
Yeah.
There are just too many, 20.
Yeah.
And I don't know, identification of the risk almost is a backside covering exercise. You identify it as a risk, and if something goes wrong, pushed it upward. But I don't think that's the right way of thinking about it.
So we have talked at the MC last time about how we might put some of these risks together. So again, it goes back to the point about what's strategic risk. So again, I think in the next iteration we will have done quite a bit of work on that and shared with you first. Make sure it's going in the way you want to see it happen. I think, which is important.
I think there's always a risk coming down sat on you debate forevermore. What is the actual risk?
Yeah.
So if you look at 13, the risk is we can't deliver care to our residents, and our residents are dying in their homes or something.
Yeah.
Not
Um,
predictive.
Rather than
Yeah,
It's too detailed.
with respect, we can
Yeah.
debate that forevermore, but to have 20 is probably sort of what you're doing on that will be useful. But trying to write what is the real risk as opposed to what are the factors that may cause the risk.
Of course.
Okay.
But sometimes you have, I think that's sort of a expressing it, and obviously the strategic risk you did mention is a real strategic risk. That's really important. But as you say, some of the operational things underneath it are not. I mean, you can sometimes have some operational corporate things in a separate corporate risk register that is dealt with by the executive and doesn't come to this committee. That's one way of doing it. Or you just say these are the things that feed into those headlines, as you say.
Mr. Chairman, do you think changes of risk within the 6 month period, if they move up to the red, should be flagged to this committee? If they move out of a green or an amber, that rather than being a full risk report comes to committee, that actually we are made aware of it. I appreciate
Yeah.
we have meetings a little more frequent than 6 months.
So one of the things I want to think about with you in this review of effectiveness is think about the reporting we do, and we could do something that's more agile that does actually do that. Just gives you this risk has changed significantly since last time.
Yeah, that'd be
Rather
good.
than having a whole risk report.
Yeah.
How is that reflected if a risk suddenly becomes within the 6 month period? How does it get reflected before the 6 months?
So an executive management team, they look at the risks every 2 months. So
Right,
it gets picked up there. So again, we can flag that then to you in our cycle of reporting.
So I think if there is a significant change in any one risk
Yeah.
at the 2 month mark, we ought to at least get notified.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry, there's just one more point, Chairman,
Yeah.
your time. Or,
Yeah.
So I mean, I like the way it's written, it's set out like this. I particularly like the one on risk 5, which is probably not one of the most difficult risks that's been dealt with. Some of the others are more tricky. They've actually RAG rated the current status.
Yeah.
I do think that's much easier to sort of grasp. And I do sort of slightly worry about the one, say, for example, one before that, which just says in progress, in progress, in progress. I just wonder whether we might slightly get fobbed off. Yeah.
We will work on making that more consistent. We had given a bit of freedom to start with.
Yeah.
Directors to.
It just goes to the point of, what do we do with these? Are we going to have deep dives on them?
Exactly. So that's helpful.
but I think that table there is very helpful and is a huge improvement on what we've seen in the past.
Yes.
Great stuff, thank you. So can I ask the committee to note the report, please?
Yep.
Great. Can we move on to item number 10, the review of effectiveness from the audit and transparency committee? This is something we've talked about for quite a while, and various things. The Grenfell mapping sort of took a lot of time. The Grenfell report took a lot of time. So really, I want to put some pressure behind this now to make it happen.
Yeah.
And David, you've come up with a sort of process.
Well, so SIPA very helpfully published sort of a toolkit on assessing the effectiveness of audit. So what I'm proposing we do, and you've got some of the documents attached in the appendices, is there's a self-assessment document, appendix 1. So my intention is to send you down a form you can complete electronically or in paper form as a bit of homework between now and the beginning of January. And if you have questions about individual questions, please feel free to come back to me. Then appendix 2 sets out a sort of knowledge and skills framework. So I'm not going to ask you to do a sort of a formal assessment there. Think about areas where you might value some briefings on particular topics. So again, we have the workshop which we're proposing to do to follow the review. It'd be good to build up a sort of program of briefings that we can deliver over a 12-18 month period. And so the intention is, if I later on send you the questionnaire in a format that's easy to complete, if you can return it to me by the beginning of January, we'll collate it. We'll then, with Yusuf, agree a date towards the end of January to have a workshop. I've spoken with Gerard, and there's an individual who we think could be a good independent facilitator. So rather than us marking our own homework, have somebody come in to help us to do the workshop and to have that conversation with you about how you assess the effectiveness of the committee, what things you would like to do differently, better, what actions you want to take to improve that. We did the process recently at Westminster, and we came with an action plan of 9 actions that flowed from it. Similar process, but a really helpful workshop to talk through the assessment and the areas you want to get more into in terms of briefing or in terms of agendas. And that's the other bit I want us to focus on with you, if that's okay, is to think about a forward plan of reports coming to the committee and thinking about how we operate the cycle, so you get more input into the report and more ownership of the reports that come here, so that they do what you need them to do. So the kind of numbers of reports, the content, the structure of reports, the kind of focus of reports, to help you to feel like you're able to really get into particular issues. And as the chair was saying earlier, to be able to call exec directors, lead members in on particular topics, have those in-depth conversations. So I think we can do 2 things to that workshop. One is to sort of help you assure yourselves that actually as a committee you're working well, or there are things we can put in place to help support that, doing briefings, and to shape the work programme for the committee over the next 12-18 months as well.
That workshop would be online.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
And I think we have a duty to do this, A, because we ought to do it, it's good practice, but B, following our last meeting in terms of our response to the Grenfell inquiry report, that how do we just look at our working and how we work differently. One of the issues I really wanted to look at is that whole issue of Andrew touched on, reports. Do we need to see, or does the full committee need to see all these reports, or there's some reports that I as chairman could just, I don't know, but we do get bogged down in a lot of reports that we have very little. We might tinker the odd word or here, so that doesn't correspond with that paragraph, but actually it doesn't change the guts of the report. But also I need us to bear in mind, if we're wanting to do more things, how are we going to do it without having more meetings, or are we going to have more meetings, which
briefings which actually go in,
briefings still take time.
They do, but we can do them, we can do them online on Teams and those things as well. So there's opportunities, I think. But for me, again, today typifies it. There are documents here we probably could give you separately if you wanted to read, rather than include them, so we can have that conversation about how we do that in a way that gives you enough of the right information that you want to be able to feel you're being appropriately serviced.
And just see as we read all these reports that everything is getting tighter, is getting more, you've got to be more accountable, you've got to, and we therefore as a committee need to make sure that we are doing that as well. So unless there's any comments on the process of this, I think you've got your Christmas, it won't be wrapped up in Christmas paper, it'll just be this questionnaire to fill out.
Email.
And we'll aim for a date towards the end of of January.
Okay.
You want to just say a couple of words about the person we thought
Yes,
was
so I've spoken. There's a member of the independent member of the Audit Committee at Westminster, Mark Maidment, who is a former chief executive and director of finance at London Borough of Wandsworth. So he's got the right knowledge of local government, the right knowledge of what internal audit, because he would have been responsible for internal audit as director of finance, working with audit committees, and he's a very effective independent member of the audit committee at Westminster. So I think he will have the right understanding of us as an organisation and about audit committees, about the interaction between internal and external audit and yourselves. And he's very approachable, but I think he'd be very good at facilitating that conversation.
Can I just ask, online rather than in person?
I'm easy. If you'd rather have it in person, we were just thinking of
For ease, but if you
making it easier for people.
It's like Wednesdays, I guess. Yeah.
Well, should we circulate dates first and then see which?
It's a better interaction in person. Always.
Yes, we would. Yeah, it could be.
Okay, I suppose we'll go for an in-person meeting. Very happy. Yeah. If that works. Yeah. Just thinking of your time.
Indeed.
So okay.
Yeah, I think in terms of the questionnaire, you'll probably take less than an hour. In terms of the workshop, we're probably talking 2 hours. Sorry.
Okay. Do we put comments in this, or just yes or no?
You can do. So I will send it to you separately, so in a format you can electronically.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I would say, and tell me shut if I'm, is if we're saying we need to do more things or do more things in detail, the how is the crucial thing. If we want to put extra stuff in, what do we take out, or do we meet till midnight every time?
Yeah.
It would be really helpful to put it in a simplified way rather than sort of formal terms of reference. But there are, I mean, I know when I sit on overview and scrutiny committee, it can't touch things that unless they're referred to it, or if things are referred from it down to housing committee. So it'd be really helpful, because I think there is a I think the independent members would very much like to look at stuff, but actually, to what extent can we, or indeed, would that be a recommendation that we want to? But it would be helpful to, rather than everybody come up with marvellous, fabulous ideas that you all turn around and go, no.
Well, it will be useful before. Can you also send a copy of our constitution?
I will. Just clarifies
what we.
I think we need that.
Because inevitably there will on occasion be a bit of an overlap, but we sort of said quite a few times, well, that actually sits with scrutiny rather than it sits with us, but we need to clarify that.
I mean, it'd be great to have a sort of map, which things sit with scrutiny or housing or whatever it is, so that we can, it's not us, it is somebody else.
So to help earlier today, I've sent you a document, a brief document which sets out the roles of different entities: scrutiny, audit, audit committee, internal audit, external audit, and so on. So we'll see if that's helpful for you, and we can work on that further.
Great, so we can note that to progress forward. Thank you very much. Can we go now to item number 11, the action tracker and work programme, please? I guess it speaks for itself, really. So unless you have any questions, and of course the work forward programme for 2025 may change in light of our reviews.
Yeah.
Any comments on that? Liz, you're normally forensic in finding a tracker that hasn't been tracked before.
I think to be fair, I
Okay, can I ask then, we know that forward programme, as I said, 25 on May. There being no other business, that is the end of our meeting. So thank you very much, and wish you all a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year, and prosperous New Year for this committee.
Okay,
So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.